The Henderson family had been hosting their annual 4th of July barbecue for 8 years running, and 2012 promised to be their biggest celebration yet. Tom Henderson, a 45-year-old insurance agent from Millbrook, Ohio, had spent weeks preparing his backyard for 30 guests expected to arrive that afternoon. "Honey, did you remember to get extra propane?" asked his wife, Carol, 42, as she arranged red, white, and blue decorations around their spacious patio. Their teenage kids, Ashley, 16, and Brandon, 13, were setting up lawn games while their youngest, Megan, 8, hung American flags along the fence. "Got 2 extra tanks," Tom replied, lighting the massive gas grill that was the centerpiece of their celebration. "This year is going to be perfect." The Hendersons were beloved in their suburban neighborhood. Tom coached Little League, Carol volunteered at the local food bank, and their kids were honor students who helped elderly neighbors with yard work. Their annual barbecue had become a community tradition that neighbors looked forward to all year. By 2 p.m., the backyard was filled with laughter, the smell of burgers and hot dogs, and the sounds of children playing in the pool. Tom was in his element, manning the grill while telling jokes to his brother-in-law, Mike. Carol was organizing the dessert table with her sister Janet, and the kids were playing volleyball with their cousins. At 4:30 p.m., Tom announced he was going inside to get more hamburger patties from the refrigerator. Carol followed him to refill the lemonade pitcher. Ashley went to change into dry clothes after getting splashed in the pool. Brandon ran inside to use the bathroom, and little Megan said she needed to find her sunglasses. According to witness statements, all 5 family members entered the house within a 3-minute window. None of them ever came back outside. When the Henderson family didn't return after 20 minutes, their guests assumed they were dealing with some minor household crisis. It wasn't until Mike Henderson went inside to check on them that the alarm was raised. The house was empty, Mike later told Detective Paul Martinez of the Millbrook Police Department. Food was still sitting on the kitchen counter. Carol's purse was on the table, and the TV was on. It was like they had just stepped out for a moment. But they hadn't stepped out. The Hendersons' cars were still in the garage. The front door was locked from the inside, and there were no signs of struggle anywhere in the house. Most puzzling of all, the sliding glass door to the backyard remained unlocked, suggesting the family had intended to return to their guests momentarily. 30 people were in that backyard, Detective Martinez explained to the family's relatives the next day. Someone would have seen if the Hendersons had left through any exterior door. Yet somehow, 5 people vanished from inside their own home while their guests waited outside. The FBI joined the investigation when it became clear that this wasn't a typical missing persons case. Agent Susan Walker had worked family abduction cases for 12 years, but she'd never encountered anything like a Henderson disappearance. There's no evidence of forced entry, no ransom demands, no financial motives. Are you feeling it? That tension in your chest? That creeping sense that something's deeply wrong? Even if you can't explain it, if you've made it this far, it means you're one of us. Someone who won't accept the unexplained without a fight for answers. So hit that like button, subscribe to Gone Cold, and turn on notifications. Because when stories like this resurface from the shadows, you'll want to be among the first to know. Walker reported to her supervisor. The family had no enemies, no debts, no reasons to disappear voluntarily. And the logistics of abducting 5 people simultaneously from a house surrounded by witnesses defies explanation. The case consumed local and national media for months. The Vanishing Family became a cable TV documentary. Psychics offered theories about parallel dimensions. Conspiracy theorists suggested government involvement. But despite thousands of tips and leads, no trace of the Henderson family was ever found. The house was eventually sold to distant relatives who rarely visited. The backyard, once the site of joyful celebrations, was left to grow wild and untended. Real estate agent Jennifer Park had been trying to sell the Henderson property for 6 months when she finally found a buyer in July 2023. The new owners, a young couple from Columbus, wanted to renovate the entire backyard and specifically requested that the old barbecue area be completely rebuilt. The grill hasn't been used in over a decade, Jennifer explained to contractor Mike Sullivan as they surveyed the overgrown patio. The new owners want everything removed and replaced with a modern outdoor kitchen. Mike had been running Sullivan Construction for 20 years, and had dealt with plenty of abandoned properties. But something about the Henderson house made him uncomfortable. Maybe it was a local legend surrounding the family's disappearance, or maybe it was the way the neighbors still avoided walking past the house. On July 3rd, 2023, exactly 11 years and 2 days after the Henderson family had vanished, Mike and his crew began dismantling the old barbecue setup. The gas grill was rusted beyond repair. The patio stones were cracked and overgrown with weeds. An entire area needed to be excavated down to the foundation. It was Mike's assistant, Tony Rodriguez, who made the discovery that would reopen one of Ohio's most baffling cold cases. As they lifted the heavy gas grill to haul it away, Tony noticed something white wedged underneath the base. "Hey, Mike," Tony called out. "There's something under here." Carefully extracting the object, Mike found himself holding a sealed plastic bag containing what appeared to be a handwritten letter. The paper inside was yellowed but legible, protected from the elements by its plastic covering. The letter was addressed to whoever finds this and was signed Tom Henderson, July 4th, 2012. The handwriting matched samples from Tom's insurance files that police still had on record. Mike's hands shook as he read the first few lines. "If you're reading this, then we didn't make it back in time. They told us we had 1 hour to decide, and we chose to save the others. Look for us where the fireworks never stop. We're still together. Tell our families we love them." Jennifer immediately called the Millbrook Police Department, and within hours, Detective Sarah Chun, who had taken over cold cases from the retired Martinez, was standing in the Henderson backyard, holding evidence that suggested the family's disappearance was far more complex than anyone had imagined. Detective Chen's investigation into Tom Henderson's cryptic message led her to examine every fireworks-related location within a 100-mile radius of Millbrook. The phrase "where the fireworks never stop" seemed like the key to understanding what had happened to the family, but its meaning remained elusive. Could be a manufacturing plant, a storage facility, maybe even a theme park, Chen explained to FBI agent Lisa Torres, who had been called in to assist with the reopened case. "But I've checked every registered fireworks business in Ohio, and none of them report any unusual activity from July 2012. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Carol Henderson's sister Janet, who had been at the barbecue that day. When Chen showed her Tom's letter, Janet's face went pale. "I remember now," Janet said slowly. "About an hour before they disappeared, Tom got a phone call. He stepped away from the grill to take it, and when he came back, he looked scared. When I asked him about it, he said it was nothing, just work stuff." Chen pulled the Henderson family's phone records from 2012, which had been part of the original investigation. At 3:47 p.m. on July 4th, Tom had received a call from an unlisted number that lasted exactly 90 seconds. The call had been traced to a prepaid phone that was never recovered. Someone contacted Tom less than an hour before the family vanished. Chen realized this wasn't random. It was planned. Further investigation revealed that the Henderson disappearance wasn't unique. Chun discovered 4 other cases across the Midwest where entire families had vanished during community gatherings between 2008 and 2015. All had occurred during patriotic holidays. All involved families with no enemies or financial problems, and all remained unsolved. "Look at this pattern," Agent Torres said, spreading case files across Chen's desk. "Springfield, Illinois. Family of 4 vanishes during Memorial Day picnic, 2009. Des Moines, Iowa. Family of 5 disappears from 4th of July block party, 2013. Cedar Falls, Iowa. Family of 3 gone from Labor Day barbecue, 2015. But it was a discovery of a former Millbrook resident that provided the most disturbing lead. Dr. Marcus Webb had lived 3 blocks from the Hendersons until 2011, when he'd abruptly resigned from his position at Ohio State University's psychology department and disappeared. Dr. Webb had been researching something called controlled social displacement theory, the idea that removing specific families from communities could be used to study long-term psychological effects on neighborhoods and social networks. Chen's investigation into Dr. Webb led her to a network of abandoned Cold War-era facilities scattered across the Midwest. These underground bunkers, originally built for government officials during nuclear emergencies, had been decommissioned in the 1990s but never properly sealed. Webb had security clearance to access the facilities during his graduate research in the 1980s. Agent Torres discovered after reviewing classified documents. His doctoral thesis was on isolated community dynamics, essentially studying how people behave when cut off from the outside world. The phrase, "where fireworks never stop," finally made sense when they located Facility 7 Delta, a decommissioned bunker near Zanesville, Ohio. The facility had been used to store military pyrotechnics during the Cold War, and residual explosive materials still triggered occasional small detonations as they deteriorated. Local residents have been reporting random explosions in this area for years, explained Ohio Emergency Management Director Patricia Kim. "We assumed it was leftover ordnance burning off naturally. We never investigated because the facility was officially empty, but surveillance of the area revealed signs of recent activity. Tire tracks leading to concealed entrances, modified ventilation systems, and electromagnetic signatures suggesting the facility was being powered by hidden generators. If Webb is using this place as some kind of research center," Chin said, studying aerial photos of the bunker complex, "then the missing families could still be alive down there." The decision to investigate the facility required federal authorization due to potential for unexploded ordnance. Chun and Torres assembled a team that included explosive ordnance disposal specialists, psychological crisis negotiators, and medical personnel trained in treating long-term captivity victims. As they prepared for the operation, Chun couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more complex than a simple kidnapping case. Tom Henderson's letter had mentioned saving the others. But who were the others, and what had the Henderson family been asked to save them from? The underground facility was vast, much larger than the official blueprints indicated. Chun and her team found evidence that Dr. Webb had been expanding the complex for years, creating living quarters, research laboratories, and what appear to be observation areas designed to monitor human behavior. "This isn't just a bunker," Torres observed as they moved through corridors lined with one-way mirrors and recording equipment. "It's a behavioral research facility. Webb has been studying these families like lab rats." They found the first group of missing families in what had once been the facility's main command center. The Springfield family from 2009 was there, along with the Des Moines family from 2013. All were alive but showed signs of long-term psychological conditioning. "They told us the surface world had become dangerous," explained Robert Murphy, the father from the Springfield disappearance. "Dr. Webb said there have been terrorist attacks, economic collapse, that staying underground is the only way to keep our families safe. The families have been living in a carefully controlled environment where Dr. Webb could study how isolation affected family dynamics, community formation, and social adaptation. They had no access to outside news, no way to communicate with the surface world, and had been convinced that leaving the facility would mean death. But it was in the deepest level of the complex that she made the most disturbing discovery. A vast chamber where Dr. Webb had created an artificial community of nearly 50 people, all families who had been reported missing over the past 15 years. And there, in a section designed to resemble a suburban neighborhood, she found the Henderson family. Tom, Carol, Ashley, Brandon, and Megan Henderson were alive, but they had been living underground for 11 years, convinced that the surface world had ended and that they were among the last survivors of human civilization. Dr. Webb had used a combination of isolation, false information, and psychological manipulation to create a captive society that he could study without interference. "The fireworks," Tom Henderson explained when she identified herself as a police officer. "Dr. Webb said they were explosions from the war above. He told us that as long as we could hear them, it meant the fighting was still going on and we couldn't go back." Chin realized that the fireworks that never stopped weren't celebrations. They were the sound of Dr. Webb's deteriorating ordnance, deliberately left to explode randomly to maintain the illusion that the surface world was still at war. The 4th of July disappearance. Finale. Dr. Marcus Webb was found in his research laboratory, calmly reviewing behavioral data, as if the arrival of law enforcement had been just another variable in his long-term experiment. At 67, he showed no signs of mental deterioration, speaking with the clinical detachment of someone who genuinely believed his work was scientifically justified. "You're disrupting 15 years of groundbreaking research," Webb told Chin as she placed him under arrest. Do you have any idea how rare it is to study isolated human communities in completely controlled conditions? These families have provided invaluable data on social adaptation and psychological resilience. These families were kidnapped. Agent Torres responded, "You destroyed their lives." Webb's expression remained eerily calm. "I saved their lives. I gave them purpose, community, security. Look at the crime rates, the political chaos, the environmental disasters they've been spared from. My subjects have lived in peace while the outside world descended into madness." The rescue operation was complicated by the psychological state of Webb's victims. Many of the families, especially those who have been underground the longest, genuinely believed that returning to the surface would be fatal. The children who had grown up in the facility had never seen sunlight, never experienced weather, never interacted with anyone outside their artificial community. "We can't just march them out," explained Dr. Sarah Martinez, the crisis psychologist brought in to assist with the rescue. "Some of these people have been conditioned for over a decade. Suddenly learning that everything they believed was a lie could cause complete psychological collapse." Ashley Henderson, now 27 but with the social development of someone much younger, exemplified the challenge. "You're lying," she told Chen. "Dr. Webb showed us the news reports. The cities are gone. There's radiation everywhere. If we go up there, we'll die." It took weeks of careful intervention to convince the captive families that the surface world was safe, that their relatives were still alive, that 15 years of carefully constructed lies were finally being exposed. The integration of Webb's victims back into society became one of the most complex psychological cases in FBI history. The Henderson families returned to Millbrook after 11 years underground presented challenges that no textbook had prepared anyone to handle. Tom and Carol Henderson, now in their mid-50s, had missed their children's entire adolescence. Ashley was an adult who had never been to college, never had a job, never learned to drive. Brandon was 24, but had the emotional maturity of a 13-year-old. Megan, now 19, had no memories of life before the underground facility. "The hardest part isn't the time they lost," explained Dr. Martinez during a family therapy session. "It's convincing them that the time was stolen from them, not given to them." Webb was so effective at making them grateful for their captivity that they sometimes resent being rescued. The physical world had changed dramatically during their absence. Smartphones, social media, streaming services, electric cars. Technology that would have seemed like science fiction in 2012 was now commonplace. The Henderson children struggled to understand a world that had moved on without them. Tom Henderson's insurance company had long since declared him dead and paid out his life insurance policy. Their house had been sold, their belongings dispersed among relatives. Rebuilding their lives required not just psychological healing, but practical reconstruction of their entire existence. Sometimes I wonder if Dr. Webb was right. Carol admitted during one particularly difficult therapy session, "The world does seem more dangerous, more complicated than when we left. Underground, everything was simple. We knew our role, our purpose." It was a sentiment shared by many of Webb's victims. The outside world offered freedom, but also uncertainty, complexity, and responsibility that some found overwhelming after years of controlled environment. Dr. Marcus Webb was sentenced to life in prison without parole for kidnapping, false imprisonment, and conducting illegal human experimentation. His trial revealed the full scope of his operation. Detailed psychological profiles of his victims, research papers he'd written about their behavior, and plans to expand his underground community to include hundreds more families. The defendant created a false reality for his own intellectual gratification, the prosecutor argued. He played God with 50 innocent lives, stealing decades of human experience for his twisted research. But Webb's conviction didn't undo the damage. Of the 12 families rescued from the facility, only 5 were able to successfully reintegrate into society. Others remained in specialized care facilities, unable to cope with the complexity of modern life. 2 families requested to return to underground living, though in legitimate communities. The Henderson family's recovery was gradual but remarkable. Ashley eventually enrolled in community college, studying psychology with the goal of helping other captivity survivors. Brandon found work in computer programming, his analytical mind adapting well to structured problem solving. Megan became an advocate for missing persons families. Tom and Carol Henderson rebuilt their marriage and their relationship with their children, but they never forgot the 11 years that had been stolen from them. They established the Henderson Foundation, which provided support for families of long-term missing persons and funded research into ethical psychological treatment. Every 4th of July, the Henderson family gathered not for a barbecue, but for a quiet memorial service honoring the years they had lost and celebrating the strength that had brought them back together. They placed flowers at a memorial garden they had created in Millbrook, dedicated to all victims of psychological captivity. We learned that family isn't just about living in the same place. Tom Henderson said during a speech at the Foundation's annual fundraiser, "It's about choosing to stay connected even when someone tries to tear you apart." Webb stole our time, but he couldn't steal our love for each other. The underground facility was sealed permanently and converted into a memorial site. Dr. Webb's research was destroyed by court order, ensuring that his data could never be used to justify similar experiments. Detective Chun kept Tom's original letter framed in her office as a reminder that sometimes the most important evidence isn't what investigators find, but what victims find the courage to leave behind. The letter that had been hidden under a barbecue grill for 11 years had ultimately brought 50 people home. Proof that hope, like truth, has a way of surviving even in the darkest places. Now let me ask you, what do you think really happened to the Henderson family that 4th of July? The letter, will the fireworks never stop? Was it an experiment, a cover-up, or something far darker? Drop your theory in the comments, and don't just share yours. Reply to others too, because sometimes the truth hides in the patterns we piece together. If this story hit you like it hit us, give it a like, subscribe to Gone Cold, send it to someone who lives for real-life mysteries. Because here, every cold case still burns, if only in memory.